CEO wagered a fortune to conquer the girl who hates rich men. Now he can't stop thinking about her. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The evening sky over Manhattan was a canvas of deep blues and purples as Alexander Reed stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. 52 floors below, the city buzzed with life. Tiny figures and yellow cabs moving in organized chaos. But Alexander wasn't watching the spectacular view that had cost him $30 million. His attention was fixed on the building across the street, specifically the corner office where a woman worked late into the evening. For 3 weeks he had observed her, always the last to leave, always focused with an intensity that matched his own. There was something fascinating about her dedication, something that made her stand out among the thousands of ambitious professionals in the city. Tonight, he would finally meet her face to face. "Sir, your car is ready." His assistant's voice came through the intercom, interrupting his thoughts. "Thank you, Melissa. I'll be down shortly." Alexander adjusted his custom Brioni suit and checked his reflection in the mirrored wall. At 35, he was at the peak of his powers, financially, physically, and socially. Forbes had recently estimated his worth at $2.9 billion, the empire he had built from scratch now spanning 3 continents. Women threw themselves at him constantly, yet here he was, intrigued by a woman who didn't even know he existed. The elevator descended silently, and he used the moments alone to review what he knew about her. Olivia Bennett, 28, graduated top of her class from Columbia, working as the lead strategist at Carson Group, a mid-sized marketing firm that his company, Reed Enterprises, had recently acquired. She had declined 3 promotions in the past 2 years, preferring to remain hands-on with clients rather than move into management. Unmarried, no children, lived alone in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, despite earning enough to afford Manhattan. What the dossier his team had compiled didn't explain was why she seemed completely unimpressed by wealth and status, qualities that had opened every door for Alexander throughout his adult life. His Bentley waited at the curb, the driver holding the door open. "The Carson Group office, sir?" "No, James. The Artisan Cafe on 43rd. Ms. Bennett stops there most evenings before heading home." The car slid into traffic, and Alexander checked his watch. If her patterns held, she would arrive at the cafe in approximately 20 minutes. Just enough time for him to secure the perfect table and prepare for their accidental meeting. The Artisan Cafe was deliberately modest given its midtown location, exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, and a clientele more focused on their laptops than status signaling. Alexander had chosen his attire carefully, still impeccably tailored, but without the flash that usually marked his public appearances. Tonight, he wanted to be just another successful professional unwinding after work. He ordered a black coffee and opened his laptop, positioning himself at a corner table that offered a clear view of the entrance. 15 minutes later, the door opened and Olivia Bennett walked in. In person, she was even more striking than from afar. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail and she wore no makeup beyond a touch of lip balm. Her clothes were quality but understated. A charcoal pencil skirt, cream blouse, and practical heels. But it was her posture that caught his attention. Straight-backed, confident, with none of the practiced grace of the socialites he usually encountered. She ordered at the counter, then scanned the room for a seat. The cafe was busier than usual, and Alexander had anticipated this, ensuring that the only available table was next to his. As she approached, he pretended to be absorbed in his work. "Excuse me, would you mind if I sat here?" Her voice was clear and direct, without the affected softness many used when addressing him. Alexander looked up, feigning surprise. "Not at all, please." He moved his belongings to make space. "Busy evening." "Always is." She set down her cup, chamomile tea, he noted, and pulled out her own laptop. "Thanks." For several minutes, they worked in silence. Alexander was unaccustomed to being ignored. Even people who didn't recognize him seemed to sense his importance, offering deference without knowing why. Olivia treated him as she would any stranger, with basic courtesy but nothing more. He closed his laptop. Long day? She glanced up, clearly not eager for small talk but too polite to dismiss him entirely. Very. You? The usual corporate battles, nothing a good cup of coffee won't fix. He offered his hand. Alexander. After a brief pause, she accepted the handshake. Olivia. Her grip was firm, her hand warm. Alexander felt an unexpected spark of genuine interest beyond his planned pursuit. May I ask what keeps you working so late? Most of Manhattan is heading to happy hour by now. She raised an eyebrow. Client presentation tomorrow, and you? Acquisition details that won't iron themselves out. He smiled, the charming smile that had graced magazine covers. I'm surprised we haven't run into each other before. I'm often here around this time. I usually go straight home, but I needed a change of scenery tonight. She took a sip of her tea. The office walls were closing in. I know that feeling well. Which company are you with? He asked, despite knowing the answer. Carson Group. We're a marketing firm specializing in non-profit and sustainability branding. Admirable focus. How did you choose that niche? Something in her expression shifted, becoming more guarded. I believe business should serve greater purposes than just profit. And profit and purpose can't coexist? Alexander challenged gently. They can. Rarely do. She closed her laptop. In my experience, when wealth accumulates too heavily on one side, something valuable is being extracted from elsewhere. Alexander leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. No one spoke to him this directly anymore, certainly not about wealth inequality. That's quite a generalization. Some of the wealthiest people I know are also the most philanthropic. Tax write-offs and PR make convenient bedfellows, she said with a slight smile. But I shouldn't judge. I don't know your friends. What about me? What assumptions have you made based on my coffee choice and laptop brand? Her eyes narrowed slightly. That you're successful, confident, and accustomed to getting what you want. Beyond that, I try not to assume. Yet you seem to have strong opinions about wealth. Experience shapes perspective, she replied cryptically. And now, if you'll excuse me, I should head home. She gathered her belongings efficiently. Something about her imminent departure made Alexander uncharacteristically impulsive. Have dinner with me tomorrow. Olivia paused, studying him with those direct eyes. I don't think so, but thank you for the offer. Why not? I don't date strangers from coffee shops. Then let's not be strangers. Alexander Reed. He offered his hand again, this time with his full name. The change was immediate. Recognition flashed in her eyes, followed by something harder to identify. Disappointment, perhaps? Her posture stiffened. Reed Enterprises, the company that just acquired Carson Group. Yes. So you knew exactly who I was before you sat down. Alexander considered lying, but sensed it would only make things worse. Yes. She hoisted her bag onto her shoulder. Mr. Reed, I don't mix business with pleasure, and I certainly don't date men who orchestrate accidental meetings after researching me. Good night. She left without looking back, leaving Alexander staring after her, the rejection stinging more than it should have. His phone buzzed, his best friend and CFO, Marcus Whitman. How'd the meet cute go? Marcus asked when he answered. She walked out when she realized who I was. Marcus laughed. The great Alexander Reed rejected? I'm shocked. What's your next move? I'm not sure there is one. She seemed genuinely uninterested. Since when has that stopped you? You've pursued hostile corporate takeovers with less motivation. Alexander watched through the window as Olivia flagged down a taxi. This is different. Different how? Because she's the first woman who hasn't fallen at your feet? That makes her what? A challenge? No, it's Alexander struggled to articulate what had drawn him to Olivia Bennet. It wasn't just her beauty or the novelty of her rejection. There was something authentic about her that he rarely encountered in his world of calculated appearances and strategic relationships. "She's real," he finally said. Marcus was silent for a moment. "Careful, Alex. She works for a company you own. This could get messy." "I know," Alexander sighed. "I'll back off." But even as he said the words, he knew they weren't true. Something about Olivia Bennet had gotten under his skin, and Alexander Reed wasn't accustomed to denying himself what he wanted. The next morning, Olivia arrived at her office to find a delivery awaiting her. Not flowers or jewelry, the usual tactics of men like Reed, but a rare first edition of Small is Beautiful, Economics as If People Mattered, a book she had once mentioned in an interview for the company newsletter. The note read simply, "Not all wealth is created equal. Neither are all apologies. Coffee again sometime?" It was signed AR. She placed the book in her drawer and tried to focus on work, but her mind kept returning to their encounter. Why was a billionaire CEO pursuing her? Was it the challenge, the novelty of rejection, or something else entirely? Across town, Alexander was facing similar distractions. During a board meeting, his thoughts drifted to Olivia's dismissive exit, her clear disdain for his world. Usually, when Alexander wanted something, or someone, he pursued it with tactical precision until it was his. But standard tactics wouldn't work here. Olivia Bennet required a different approach. "Earth to Alex," Marcus nudged him as the meeting concluded. "You're thinking about her again, aren't you?" "I sent her a book." "A book? Not diamonds? You're slipping." "She'd throw diamonds in my face. The book might at least get opened." Marcus studied his friend. "I haven't seen you like this since. Actually, I've never seen you like this. What's your end game here?" Alexander considered the question. What did he want from Olivia Bennet? A date? A conquest? Or something more substantial? "I want to understand her," he finally admitted. "I want to know why she looks at the world, at me, the way she does, and if understanding her doesn't change her opinion of you." Alexander stared out at the Manhattan skyline. The empire he'd built spread before him. For the first time in years, he felt uncertain. "Then I'll have learned something important," he said quietly. What he didn't say, what he barely admitted to himself, was that Olivia Bennet had made him question things he'd long taken for granted. His values, his priorities, the very foundations of the life he'd constructed. And that, more than anything, was why he couldn't simply walk away. Olivia stood in the Carson Group conference room, delivering the final points of her presentation. The clients, executives from a sustainable farming initiative, nodded appreciatively as she outlined the marketing strategy her team had developed. "We've designed this campaign to emphasize authenticity above all," she explained, gesturing to the mock-ups displayed on the screen. "Consumers are increasingly skeptical of corporate greenwashing. Your organization's genuine commitment to regenerative agriculture is your greatest asset." As the presentation concluded and the clients shook her hand enthusiastically, Olivia felt a familiar satisfaction. This was why she'd declined management promotions. The direct impact of her work, helping worthy causes find their voice in a crowded marketplace. Her colleague, Emma, sidled up beside her as the clients filed out. "Knocked it out of the park as usual," she said. "Though I'm surprised you're so composed considering..." "Considering what?" Emma's eyes widened. "You haven't heard? The company-wide email went out an hour ago. Reed himself is visiting today, full office tour, meeting the teams. Everyone's in panic mode." Olivia's stomach dropped. "Alexander Reed is coming here? Today?" "In about 30 minutes. Didn't you get the email?" She checked her phone. There it was, buried under client messages. An official visit from the CEO of their parent company, positioned as a chance to build synergy and align vision. Corporate speak for sizing up which departments to streamline. "I need coffee," Olivia muttered, heading for the break room. Emma followed, her voice lowered conspiratorially. I heard he never does these tours personally, usually sends his executive team. What do you think it means?" "It means I'm leaving early," Olivia replied, filling her mug. The book he'd sent her sat heavily in her mind, a thoughtful gift that showed he'd researched her thoroughly. The gesture was equal parts impressive and unsettling. "You can't leave. This is huge. Reed Enterprises acquires companies all the time, but the man himself rarely shows his face." Emma's expression turned sly. "Plus, have you seen him? Those Forbes 30 under 40 photos did not exaggerate." Olivia gave her friend a pointed look. "I've met him." "What? When? How did you not tell me this?" "Last night at the cafe. He pretended it was coincidental, but he knew exactly who I was." Emma's jaw dropped. "Alexander Reed staged a meet cute with you? That's manipulative, presumptuous." Olivia sipped her coffee. Exactly what you'd expect from someone who views the world as his personal shopping catalog. Or romantic, depending on your perspective. My perspective is that men with that much power and money are dangerous. Emma studied her friend's face. "This sounds personal." Before Olivia could respond, their department head appeared in the doorway, looking flustered. "There you are. The executive team is arriving early. Everyone to the main conference room now." The office transformed as workers hurriedly cleared desks, straightened clothing, and whispered nervously to one another. Olivia reluctantly followed the crowd into the large glass-walled conference room that overlooked the city. She positioned herself at the back, hoping to remain inconspicuous, but Emma pulled her forward. "Front and center. If he's interested in you, this could be good for the whole department." "That's not how I want to advance my career," Olivia hissed, but it was too late. They were now in the second row just as the elevator doors opened, revealing Alexander Reed flanked by several executives. In the professional setting, he was even more commanding, the perfect tailoring of his suit emphasizing his athletic build, his confident stride drawing every eye in the room. Olivia felt a flicker of unwanted attraction which she quickly suppressed. The department heads rushed forward, eagerly shaking hands. Alexander smiled graciously, but his eyes scanned the room until they locked with Olivia's. His smile shifted slightly, becoming more genuine, less practiced. The company president launched into a fawning introduction as Alexander moved to the front of the room. "We are honored to have Mr. Reed visiting our humble offices today. As you know, Reed Enterprises' acquisition of Carson Group represents an exciting new chapter." Alexander raised a hand, politely cutting off the speech. "Thank you, Robert. I prefer to keep these visits informal." His voice carried effortlessly. "Carson Group's reputation for ethical marketing and authentic storytelling is precisely why we were interested in bringing you into the Reed family. I'm here to learn, not to instruct." A ripple of relieved murmurs moved through the crowd. Alexander continued, "I'd like to spend time understanding your processes, your challenges, and your successes. Starting with the team that handled the sustainable farming campaign I've heard so much about." Emma elbowed Olivia, who kept her expression neutral despite the obvious targeting. Alexander was using his position to force an interaction she had already declined. The next hour was excruciating. Alexander moved through the office with charismatic ease, showing genuine interest in people's work, remembering names, asking insightful questions. Employees who had been nervous were soon charmed, eagerly sharing their projects and ideas. When he finally reached Olivia's team, she felt the weight of Emma's excitement beside her. Alexander greeted each team member individually before turning to her. "Ms. Bennett, I understand you led the farming initiative. Impressive work." "Thank you, Mr. Reed. It was a team effort." Her tone was professionally cordial but cool. "I'd love to hear more about your approach. Would you mind showing me the campaign materials?" It wasn't really a request. Olivia gestured to her workspace where the presentation boards were still displayed. As she walked him through the strategy, keeping her explanation strictly professional, she was annoyed to find him asking genuinely thoughtful questions about ethical marketing practices. Your emphasis on transparency is refreshing, he said when she finished. Most agencies would have glossed over the transitional challenges the farmers faced. Most agencies are selling an illusion. We prefer reality. He smiled at the barb. Reality has its own appeal. Would you have time for a more in-depth discussion? Perhaps over lunch? Olivia felt the curious eyes of her colleagues on them. Refusing would seem unprofessional, yet accepting felt like capitulation. I brought lunch today, but thank you. Then coffee? After work? Strictly professional. Emma made a small choking sound beside them, clearly astonished at Olivia's continued resistance. Mr. Reed, I appreciate your interest in our work, but I think my team has covered the essentials of the campaign. Olivia maintained steady eye contact, refusing to be intimidated. Alexander studied her for a moment, then nodded. Of course. I wouldn't want to take up more of your valuable time. He turned to address the whole team. Exceptional work, everyone. You're maintaining the high standards that made Carson Group a perfect addition to our portfolio. As he moved on to the next department, Emma grabbed Olivia's arm. Are you insane? You just turned down the CEO, twice. He's not interested in my marketing strategies, Emma. So what? He's Alexander Reed. Do you know how many women would kill to be pursued by him? Olivia shook her head. That's exactly the problem. He's used to getting whoever he wants. I refuse to be another acquisition. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of whispered conversations and speculative glances. By 5 o'clock, Olivia had a throbbing headache and a desperate desire to escape the office. She packed her bag quickly, hoping to avoid further discussion of Alexander Reed's visit. As she waited for the elevator, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Apologies for putting you in an uncomfortable position today. That wasn't my intention. AR. Olivia stared at the message, wondering how he'd obtained her personal number. Another boundary crossed. She slipped the phone into her pocket without responding, just as the elevator arrived. To her dismay, Alexander Reed himself stood inside, alone. Ms. Bennett. He held the door as she hesitated. Going down? Reluctantly, she entered the elevator, positioning herself as far from him as the small space allowed. How did you get my number? Company directory. I should have asked first. The elevator began its descent, the tension between them almost tangible. What do you want from me, Mr. Reed? Really? He considered her question seriously. Initially, I was intrigued by someone who stayed as late as I did. Then I was curious about a person who seemed completely unimpressed by wealth and status. Now? He paused. Now I'm fascinated by a woman who knows her own mind and isn't afraid to speak it, even to someone in my position. That's a low bar for fascination. You'd be surprised how rare those qualities are in my world. Olivia turned to face him fully. Have you considered that I'm not interested in being your world's exception? That I have my own life, my own goals, that don't involve being pursued by a billionaire who's used to getting his way? Alexander didn't respond immediately, his expression thoughtful. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. I have a proposition for you. I'm not interested in propositions. Hear me out. One dinner, professional context, public place of your choosing. In exchange, I'll personally approve the funding for any pro bono campaign your team wants to pursue for the next year. Full creative control, no budget restrictions. Olivia's eyes narrowed. You're trying to buy my time? I'm offering a business exchange that benefits causes you care about. The elevator reached the lobby, but neither moved as the doors opened. One dinner, Ms. Bennett. If you decide I'm exactly the entitled billionaire you believe me to be, I'll never approach you again, professionally or otherwise. The doors began to close, and Alexander reached out to hold them open, waiting for her answer. Olivia thought of the numerous underfunded nonprofits she'd had to turn away, organizations doing vital work without the resources for proper marketing. With Reed's offer, her team could help dozens of worthy causes. If I agree, I choose the restaurant, I set the time limit, and there will be clear boundaries. Absolutely. And regardless of how the dinner goes, you'll honor the funding promise? You have my word. We can draw up a formal agreement if you prefer. Olivia stepped out of the elevator, Alexander following. Fine. One dinner next Wednesday. I'll text you the details. I look forward to it. As she walked away, Olivia questioned her decision. Had she compromised her principles for funding, or was she merely being practical? And why did part of her, a part she was trying desperately to ignore, feel a flutter of anticipation at the prospect of seeing him again? Alexander watched her leave, aware that for the first time in years, he was pursuing something without a clear strategy for success. Olivia Bennett was unpredictable, principled, and seemingly immune to his usual advantages. The challenge she presented was unlike any corporate negotiation or business deal. What had begun as curiosity was evolving into something more complicated, a genuine desire to understand a woman who saw the world so differently than he did. A woman who might actually change his perspective rather than simply adapt to his. As he slid into the back seat of his waiting car, Alexander realized he was smiling. "Good news, sir?" his driver asked. "Just a successful negotiation, James. One with unexpectedly high stakes." Emma perched on the edge of Olivia's desk, scrutinizing her friend's outfit. "You're wearing that to dinner with Alexander Reed? It's so sensible." Olivia smoothed the front of her navy blazer. "It's a business dinner." "At Terroir?" Emma shook her head in disbelief. "That farm-to-table place in Brooklyn where you have to book months in advance? That's hardly the corporate steakhouse I expected." "I chose it specifically because it's not his world," Olivia replied, gathering her belongings. "It's small, unpretentious, focuses on sustainability, and they know me there. Home court advantage. Smart." Emma leaned closer. "But I still think you could have gone with something less librarian." "I'm not trying to impress him." "Clearly." Emma sighed dramatically. "Just promise me you'll actually listen to what he has to say, instead of dismissing him outright because of his bank account." Olivia paused. Emma's words hit closer to home than she'd like to admit. Had she already decided who Alexander Reed was based on preconceptions? The thought made her uncomfortable. "I'll listen," she conceded. "But this is strictly a professional obligation. One dinner in exchange for funding that will help deserving organizations. Whatever helps you sleep at night, sweetie." Emma winked as she returned to her desk. Olivia arrived at Terroir 15 minutes early, wanting to secure the right table and mental space. The restaurant was housed in a renovated industrial building, with exposed brick walls and repurposed wood furnishings. Large windows looked out on a small urban garden where many of the ingredients were grown. The owner, Sophia, greeted her warmly. "Your usual table by the window, Leave?" "Actually, I need something a bit more private tonight. Business dinner." Sophia raised an eyebrow but led her to a corner table partially screened by potted herbs. "Special occasion?" "Not exactly. Just a work thing." As Sophia walked away, Olivia noticed several heads turned toward the entrance. Alexander Reed had arrived precisely on time, and his presence immediately altered the energy of the room. Even in this understated environment, dressed in what was likely his most casual clothing, dark jeans and a cashmere sweater over a button-down, he emanated authority and privilege. He scanned the restaurant, nodding politely at the curious stares, then smiled when he spotted her. Olivia felt a treacherous flutter in her stomach and quickly suppressed it. "Ms. Bennett," he greeted her, extending his hand. "Thank you for selecting such an interesting venue." She shook his hand briefly. "I thought you might appreciate experiencing how the other 99% dine." To her surprise, Alexander chuckled. "I deserved that, but I should mention I grew up in a household where boxed macaroni and cheese was a luxury. The 1% is a more recent habitat." Olivia hadn't expected this admission, Nothing in his public persona suggested humble beginnings. "Your background isn't mentioned in any of your profiles," she said as they sat down. "It doesn't fit the narrative people expect from a CEO." He picked up the menu, which was handwritten on recycled paper. "Most prefer the myth of the born titan of industry over the reality of the kid from South Boston who got lucky." Sophia approached their table, recognition dawning on her face as she saw Alexander. "Welcome to Terroir. I see you're dining with one of our regulars." "Olivia has excellent taste," Alexander replied. "Everything here looks remarkable." "We're proud to source all our ingredients from within a 50-mile radius," Sophia explained. "Tonight's specials are on the board, but I'd recommend the chef's tasting menu if you want the full experience." "Perfect," Alexander agreed. "And perhaps a bottle of whatever local wine you'd suggest?" After Sophia left, Olivia studied him across the table. "South Boston? Triple-decker house on G Street. My mother worked 3 jobs after my father left, which is why," he added, seeming to anticipate her next question, "I've never spoken publicly about growing up poor. She worked too hard for me to use her struggles as an inspirational backstory for magazine profiles." Olivia hadn't expected this level of perceptiveness or respect. It disrupted her carefully constructed image of Alexander Reed, billionaire stereotype. "How does someone go from South Boston to the Forbes list?" Alexander considered his answer. "The simplified version is scholarships, student loans, grinding through MIT while working nights, then a tech startup that got acquired at the right time. But that skips over the countless failures, the nights sleeping in my car to save rent money, the constant fear of ending up back where I started. And now? You've clearly overcome that fear." "Have I?" His eyes met hers with unexpected vulnerability. "Success isn't a destination, Ms. Bennett. It's a treadmill that goes faster the longer you stay on it." Sophia returned with wine and the first course, tiny radishes with house-cultured butter and sea salt. As she explained the dish, Olivia observed Alexander's genuine interest and respectful questions. When they were alone again, Alexander tasted the wine and nodded appreciatively. "Impressive. Unconventional choice to grow vinifera in this climate, but they've managed the acidity beautifully." "You know wine?" "I know enough to appreciate when someone is doing something challenging for the right reasons." He looked directly at her, like running a marketing firm that prioritizes ethics over easy profits. Olivia felt her defenses softening slightly, which immediately put her on guard. "If we're moving to business topics, I should confirm that our agreement stands. Regardless of how this dinner goes, my team gets approval for pro bono campaigns. Already in motion, the paperwork was filed this morning. Your department has a dedicated fund for pro bono work, effective immediately. No strings attached." She blinked, surprised by the uncomplicated fulfillment of his promise. "Thank you." "You sound surprised. I expected more negotiation." "I keep my word, Ms. Bennett, especially on matters of integrity." He paused. "May I ask why this is so important to you, the pro bono work specifically?" Olivia considered deflecting but decided on honesty. "My father was a union organizer. He believed in using his skills to help those without power or voice. I grew up watching him advocate for people who couldn't afford professional representation." "That explains your perspective on wealth inequality." "Partly," she admitted, "but I've also seen firsthand how accumulated wealth often comes at others' expense. The factory owners who fought my father's organizing efforts lived in mansions while their workers couldn't afford health insurance." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "A valid observation for many cases. But is it always true? Is it possible to create wealth without exploitation? In theory, perhaps. In practice," she shrugged, "I've yet to see a billion-dollar fortune built entirely on ethical foundations." The second course arrived, heirloom tomato soup with foraged herbs. They ate in contemplative silence before Alexander spoke again. "I understand your skepticism, but consider this. Reed Enterprises employs over 12,000 people. Our lowest-paid workers make triple the minimum wage. with full benefits and profit sharing. We have comprehensive sustainability policies and give back to every community where we operate." He leaned forward. "Is it wrong to profit while also trying to operate ethically?" "Trying isn't the same as succeeding," Olivia countered. "And good intentions don't erase the systemic advantages that allowed you to build that wealth in the first place." "So success itself is the crime?" "Not success. Disproportionate accumulation while others lack basics." Their debate continued through the next courses: local fish with spring vegetables, followed by house-made pasta with foraged mushrooms. Olivia found herself increasingly engaged, surprised by Alexander's willingness to consider viewpoints that challenged his position. He didn't dismiss her criticisms or become defensive, instead asking thoughtful questions that forced her to articulate her beliefs more precisely. By the time dessert arrived, rhubarb tart with honey ice cream, the conversation had shifted to their personal journeys. "You declined several promotions," Alexander noted. "Most people would have jumped at management opportunities. I'm more valuable where I am. Moving up would mean less hands-on work with clients, more bureaucracy." "Purpose over position. That's rare." "Not rare enough," Olivia replied. "Too many people climb ladders without asking where they lead." Alexander smiled. "Like billionaires who might be happier with less money and fewer responsibilities?" "Are you admitting you'd be happier with less?" "I'm admitting I've never considered the question until recently." He studied her across the table. "You make me question things I've long taken for granted, Olivia." The use of her first name and the sincerity in his voice created an intimacy she hadn't expected. "That's not my responsibility," she said softly. "No," he agreed, "but it might be a gift nonetheless." Their eyes held for a moment too long before Olivia looked away, conscious of boundaries she'd promised herself she wouldn't cross. "It's getting late." Alexander glanced at his watch, seeming surprised by the time. 3 hours. Your stipulated time limit has well expired." The conversation was more engaging than I anticipated. His smile was warm. High praise indeed. As they prepared to leave, Alexander insisted on paying despite Olivia's protests. "You chose the venue, which was perfect. Allow me this small courtesy." Outside, the spring evening was cool but pleasant. Olivia's apartment was within walking distance, while Alexander's driver waited discreetly down the block. "May I walk you home?" he asked. "That's not necessary." "I know, but I'd like to." Olivia hesitated, then nodded. They walked in comfortable silence for a block before she spoke. "You're not what I expected. Neither are you, though I had the advantage of research." She glanced at him. "Why me, Alexander? Truthfully, you could have any woman in New York. Why pursue someone who made it clear she wasn't interested?" He considered the question carefully. "Because you saw me, the real me, immediately. Not the wealth, not the reputation. Just a man trying too hard to impress a woman who values substance over status." He smiled ruefully. It was refreshingly terrifying. "Terrifying? You? I've built my life around certain certainties. You challenge all of them simply by being yourself." They reached her apartment building, a pre-war walk-up with exposed fire escapes zigzagging down the facade. Nothing like the luxury high-rise he likely called home. "This is me," she said, stopping. Alexander made no move to come closer. "Thank you for this evening, Olivia. I learned more than I expected." "As did I." She hesitated. "The funding agreement stands regardless, as promised." She nodded, suddenly unsure how to end the evening. A handshake seemed too formal after hours of intimate conversation, yet anything more felt inappropriate. Alexander resolved the dilemma by taking a small step back. "Good night, Olivia Bennett." "Good night, Alexander Reed." She watched him walk away, his tall figure gradually blending into the Brooklyn night. Only when he disappeared from view did she realize she was still standing outside her building, replaying moments from their dinner in her mind. Upstairs in her apartment, Olivia kicked off her shoes and tried to make sense of the evening. Alexander Reed had defied her expectations at every turn, showing humility, asking genuine questions, listening to her criticisms without defensiveness. Most surprisingly, he'd revealed vulnerabilities she wouldn't have imagined a man in his position acknowledging. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Well, is he as awful as you expected?" Olivia stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Finally, she typed, "It's complicated." More complicated than she was ready to admit, even to herself. Alexander stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, staring at the Manhattan skyline without really seeing it. Marcus lounged on the leather sofa behind him, nursing a glass of 30-year-old scotch. "So," Marcus said, breaking the silence, "you spent an entire evening in a hipster restaurant in Brooklyn, eating vegetables grown on the roof and discussing wealth inequality with a woman who thinks your very existence is problematic. And you enjoyed it?" Alexander turned, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I more than enjoyed it. I haven't had a conversation that honest in years." Honest is one thing. Actively challenging your life choices is another. Marcus set down his glass. "Alex, we've been friends since college. I've seen you pursue complex acquisitions, close impossible deals, but I've never seen you like this over a woman. She's not just any woman." Clearly. Marcus studied his friend. What happens when the novelty wears off? When being challenged becomes exhausting rather than exciting? Alexander considered the question. "I don't think it would. Olivia isn't challenging me for sport or leverage. She genuinely believes in something different than I do, and she's willing to defend that belief, even to someone who could fire her. That's either integrity or foolishness. Is there a difference?" Marcus laughed. "Now you sound like her." Alexander's phone buzzed. An email from Olivia Bennett. His heart rate quickened embarrassingly as he opened it. "Mr. Reed, thank you for dinner last night and for honoring our agreement regarding pro bono funding. My team is already developing proposals for several worthy organizations. I've attached the draft announcement for your review before it goes to the broader Carson Group team. Regards, Olivia Bennett." Formal, professional, creating distance after their evening of unexpected connection. "Bad news?" Marcus asked, noting his friend's expression. "No news, really." Alexander pocketed the phone. Just Olivia being Olivia, maintaining professional boundaries. Smart woman. Yes, she is. Alexander poured himself a drink. "Which is why I need your advice. I want to see her again, but another dinner invitation would likely be rejected." "Then don't ask her to dinner." Marcus leaned forward. "You're both passionate about your work. Create a reason for collaboration that benefits her causes while giving you legitimate time together." Alexander considered this. "The Reed Foundation's annual charity gala is coming up. We need a fresh approach. Something beyond the usual black tie affair that feels more meaningful." "Perfect. Carson Group handles marketing for non-profits. It's a natural fit to bring her team in for a consultation." Alexander nodded slowly. "It could work, but she'll see through it if it's just a pretext." "Then don't make it one," Marcus said simply. "Actually listen to her ideas. Implement them. Show her that her perspective matters to you through actions, not just words." "When did you become so insightful about relationships?" Marcus grinned. "I've always been insightful. You've just never needed my wisdom until now." 2 days later, Olivia was reviewing creative briefs when Emma burst into her office clutching her tablet like a precious artifact. "Have you seen this?" she demanded, thrusting the screen forward. Olivia blinked at the company-wide email displayed there. "The Reed Foundation Gala project? No, what about it?" "Read it!" The email detailed a new initiative. Carson Group had been selected to reimagine the Reed Foundation's annual fundraising gala, traditionally a state affair that raised millions for various causes. This year, they wanted something transformative, more authentic, more impactful, and Olivia Bennet was specifically requested to lead the project. "This is huge," Emma breathed. "The Reed Gala is legendary. Celebrities, politicians, billionaires all in one room opening their checkbooks for charity." Olivia frowned. "It's also legendarily superficial. Rich people easing their consciences with tax-deductible donations while eating $1,000 dinners. Which is exactly why they want you. Look." Emma pointed to a paragraph. "They specifically mention wanting to move away from performative philanthropy toward meaningful engagement with causes. That's you all over." Olivia read the entire email more carefully. The language was genuine, the goals aligned with her values, and the opportunity to redirect millions in charitable giving toward worthy causes was significant. It was also, almost certainly, engineered by Alexander Reed to create another point of contact between them. "I'll need to think about this," she said finally. "Think about what? This is career-making. Plus, you'd be working directly with Reed himself." "That's part of what I need to consider." Emma's eyes widened in realization. "Oh my God, something did happen at dinner." "Nothing happened," Olivia insisted. "We talked, that's all." "Talked so well that he's now manufacturing reasons to work with you personally?" Before Olivia could respond, her desk phone rang, the Carson Group president's office requesting her immediate presence. She shot Emma a warning look. "Not a word about this to anyone." "My lips are sealed, but my imagination is running wild." Upstairs, Olivia found not only President Robert Simmons waiting but also Alexander Reed himself, casually leaning against the conference table as if he belonged there, which, technically, as the owner of the company, he did. "Ms. Bennet," Simmons greeted her with unusual warmth. "Mr. Reed has just been sharing his vision for the Foundation Gala. We're honored that he's requested you specifically for this prestigious assignment." Alexander straightened, his eyes meeting hers. "Ms. Bennet's perspective on authentic engagement with causes is exactly what the Foundation needs." Olivia maintained her professional composure despite the butterflies in her stomach. "It's an interesting opportunity, though unexpected." "Sometimes the unexpected opportunities are the most transformative," Alexander replied, a subtle reference to their dinner that only she would understand. Simmons beamed, oblivious to the undercurrent. "I've assured Mr. Reed that we'll put our full resources behind this project. You'll have whatever team members you need." "That's generous," Olivia said carefully. "May I ask why this shift in approach for the gala? It's been successful in its current format for years." Alexander's expression turned serious. "Because you were right, Ms. Bennet. Too often, philanthropy becomes performance rather than purpose. I'd like to change that, starting with my own foundation." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. This didn't feel like a mere pretext to see her again. It seemed like a genuine attempt to implement change based on their conversations. "I'll need complete creative control," she said. Simmons looked alarmed, but Alexander nodded. "Agreed. And final approval over the guest list and fundraising structure." "Within reason, yes. And I'll need you to be hands-on throughout the process, Mr. Reed, not delegating to your staff." A smile tugged at his lips. "That was always my intention, Miss Bennet." Simmons looked between them, sensing the tension but misreading its nature. "Well, this sounds like the beginning of a wonderful collaboration. Why don't you two discuss initial concepts while I handle some pressing matters?" He hurried out, leaving them alone in the conference room. "This is transparent even for you," Olivia said once the door closed. "Is it? The Reed Foundation distributes over $30 million annually to causes around the world. Making that process more authentic, more impactful, that seems like something you'd value. Don't use good causes to manipulate me." Alexander stepped closer. "I'm not. I'm offering you the chance to influence how significant resources are allocated. Yes, I want to see you again, but I also genuinely want your perspective on this work." Olivia studied him, searching for signs of insincerity and finding none. "You could have just asked me to dinner again." "Would you have said yes?" She hesitated. "Probably not." "Exactly. This way we both get what we want. You get to redirect philanthropic resources according to your values. I get your insights and your company." The honesty of his response was disarming. "Meetings will be in professional settings during business hours," she stipulated. "Of course. And no leveraging your position as CEO to pressure me or my team." "I wouldn't dream of it." Olivia sighed, recognizing she was running out of objections. "Fine. When do we start?" "How about now? I've cleared my afternoon." An hour later, they were deep in discussion in Olivia's office, whiteboards filled with concepts and strategies. The gala was 9 weeks away, a tight timeline for a complete reimagining, but Alexander had promised whatever resources they needed. "What if," Olivia suggested, drawing on the board, "instead of a single event, we create a week of engagement? Attendees don't just write checks, they participate in the work of the organizations they're supporting." Alexander considered this. Hands-on involvement from people who normally only engage financially. "I like it, but will they participate?" "They will if you do. You set the example. Others follow." "So I'll be building houses and serving meals alongside my board members?" "Exactly. Real work, not photo ops." Alexander smiled. "My construction skills are rudimentary at best, but I'm willing if you are. I'll be there documenting the authentic moments for our campaign materials." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, the professional pretense momentarily dropping to reveal the genuine connection forming beneath. The moment was broken by Emma bursting in. "Sorry to interrupt, but—" She stopped abruptly, taking in the scene. Olivia and Alexander standing close together at the whiteboard, the energy between them palpable. "Yes, Emma?" Olivia prompted, stepping back. The Westridge Foundation is online too. Something about their proposal." "I'll take it at my desk," Olivia said, grateful for the interruption. "Mr. Reed, would you excuse me for a moment?" "Of course." Alexander gathered his notes. "I should check in with my office anyway. Same time tomorrow to continue?" "That works." After he left, Emma closed the door and leaned against it dramatically. "The chemistry in here could power the entire building. What exactly is happening?" "We're planning a charity gala." "No, you're planning something much more interesting than a charity gala." Olivia sighed. "It's complicated, Emma. He's not who I thought he was, but he's still Alexander Reed, billionaire CEO, my boss's boss's boss." "Labels," Emma dismissed with a wave. "The question is, how do you feel when you're with him?" "Challenged, heard, respected." Olivia paused, and terrified. Of him, of myself, of the fact that I'm starting to care what he thinks, that I look forward to seeing him. That's dangerous territory for someone like me. Emma's expression softened. "Because of your dad? Because of what happened with the factory?" Olivia nodded. Her father had spent years organizing workers at a manufacturing plant, only to see the company suddenly close and relocate overseas when unionization seemed inevitable. He'd never recovered from the blow, believing he'd failed the very people he'd promised to help. "Alexander isn't that factory owner," Emma said gently. "From what I've seen, he actually listens to you." "For now. But people with power can change the rules whenever it suits them. Or maybe he's exactly who he seems. A smart, successful man who values your perspective and happens to find you irresistible." Olivia shook her head. "Nothing about this situation is simple. The best things never are." Across town, Alexander was facing similar scrutiny from Marcus. "Let me get this straight," Marcus said, pacing Alexander's office. "You're completely redesigning your foundation's signature event based on the suggestions of a woman you've known for less than 2 weeks? Her suggestions are good ones. The gala has become predictable. Wealthy people in expensive clothes making performative donations. Performative donations still buy a lot of school supplies and fund a lot of research. We can do better. Make a more lasting impact. Marcus stopped pacing. This isn't just about the gala. You're changing, Alex, ever since you met her. Alexander considered this. Maybe I am. Is that so terrible? It depends on why you're changing. Is it for yourself or for her approval? The question hit a nerve. Alexander had never sought anyone's approval, not since leaving South Boston behind. His success had been built on confidence in his own judgment, often against prevailing wisdom. Was he now altering his approach to impress Olivia Bennet? I'm changing because she's made me question assumptions I've held for years, he finally said. That's not seeking approval, it's growth. Marcus didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Just be careful. The board is already asking questions about this gala redesign. If it fails, it won't, Alexander said with certainty. Not with Olivia leading it. His phone buzzed with a text from her. Meeting tomorrow moved to 10 a.m. Bringing in community partners for input. Please confirm. He felt an almost childish excitement at the simple message and immediately replied, confirmed, looking forward to it. Alexander Reed, who had built a global empire through strategic precision and emotional detachment, was becoming increasingly aware that Olivia Bennet had disrupted his carefully constructed world. And strangest of all, he welcomed the disruption. Over the next 3 weeks, Olivia's life fell into a new rhythm. Mornings began with team meetings for the gala project. Afternoons often included site visits to potential venues or meetings with community organizations, and at least 3 times a week, Alexander Reed was physically present for some portion of the process. They maintained professional boundaries in front of others, but their conversations had taken on a familiar shorthand that spoke to their growing understanding of each other. Today, they were touring an abandoned warehouse in Queens that Olivia had suggested as a potential venue, a stark departure from the luxury hotels that typically hosted the gala. The symbolism is powerful, she explained as they walked through the cavernous space. This building once employed hundreds of workers before manufacturing moved overseas. Now it can be temporarily transformed to raise funds for programs that help communities affected by similar economic displacement. Alexander surveyed the dusty concrete floors and exposed beams. It's certainly unexpected. The board will have questions. Let them question. That's part of the point. Olivia gestured expansively. Imagine this space divided into zones representing different community needs: education, housing, healthcare, employment. Instead of a single ballroom where wealthy donors network with each other, they move through experiences that illustrate the actual work being funded. As she outlined her vision, Alexander found himself watching her more than the space. The animation in her face, the passionate gestures, the absolute conviction that this unconventional approach was worth the risks. 3 weeks ago, he would have dismissed the concept as too experimental for his foundation's signature event. Now, he was not only considering it but actively championing it. We'll need to address practical concerns, he said. Security, access for older donors, weather contingencies. Already on it. Olivia pulled out her tablet showing detailed plans. We've consulted with event security specialists, and the building has alternative entrances that can be made fully accessible. As for weather, we'll have covered arrivals areas and climate control throughout. You've thought of everything? That's my job. She hesitated. There's something else I want to show you. She led him to a small door at the back of the warehouse which opened onto a weed-strewn lot overlooking the East River. Despite the neglect, the view was spectacular. Manhattan's skyline framed perfectly across the water. This could be cleared and set up as a reflection space, Olivia said. Somewhere quiet where people can contemplate the evening's experiences and decide how they want to contribute, not just financially but with their time and influence. Alexander stood beside her, their shoulders nearly touching as they gazed at the city. It's beautiful, he admitted. Seeing Manhattan from this perspective, it's almost like looking at my life from the outside. Olivia glanced at him, surprised by the personal observation. That's exactly the feeling I want donors to have. A shift in perspective that stays with them after the event ends. You know, Alexander said quietly, when I first suggested this project, it was partly a pretext to spend time with you. I know. But it's become much more than that. You're creating something truly meaningful here, Olivia. The use of her first name, which had become more frequent in their private conversations, still sent a small thrill through her that she tried to ignore. We're creating it together, she corrected. You could have vetoed any of these ideas as too radical. But I didn't. No, she acknowledged. You didn't. They stood in companionable silence, watching the play of sunlight on the distant skyscrapers. The moment felt suspended, existing outside the professional parameters they'd established. Olivia became acutely aware of Alexander's presence beside her, his height, the faint scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from his body in the cool air. Breaking the spell, she stepped back. We should check the loading dock area. The catering team will need adequate space. Alexander nodded, respecting her retreat. Lead the way. Back at the office that evening, Olivia found Emma waiting at her desk with 2 cups of coffee and a determined expression. Intervention time, Emma announced, handing her a cup. You've been avoiding talking about Reed for weeks now. Because there's nothing to discuss, Olivia said unconvincingly. We're working on a project together. A project that has you staying late every night, volunteering for site visits and smiling at your phone whenever his texts come through. I don't smile at my phone. You absolutely do. Your whole face lights up. It's disgustingly adorable. Olivia sank into her chair. This is ridiculous. He's Alexander Reed. I'm me. Yes, and you is extraordinary. Why is it so hard to believe he sees that? Because men like him don't pursue women like me without an agenda. Emma studied her friend closely. Is it really so implausible that he genuinely values your perspective? That he finds your integrity attractive rather than intimidating? From what I've seen, he treats you with more respect than any guy you've dated in the past 5 years. Olivia couldn't argue with that point. Alexander consistently solicited her opinions, defended her ideas to skeptical board members, and credited her publicly for innovations. He had never used his position of power to pressure her, even subtly. It's complicated, she finally said. Only because you're making it complicated. You like him. He likes you. The rest is details. Those details matter, Emma. He's effectively my boss. Technically, yes. But you've maintained perfect professionalism. Everyone sees it. Emma leaned forward. Look, I'm not saying elope to Vegas. Just stop fighting whatever's happening so hard. Olivia traced the rim of her coffee cup, considering Emma's words. Even if I wanted to explore whatever this is, I don't know how. We've been so careful about maintaining boundaries. Then change the boundaries. You're both adults. Have a conversation about it. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating. Across town, Alexander was having a similar conversation with Marcus, though in a very different setting. They were at Blade and Timber, an upscale axe-throwing venue that served as their unconventional meeting spot whenever they needed to discuss sensitive matters away from corporate ears. Alexander launched his axe with precision, hitting just off-center. The venue is unconventional, but it makes sense for the message we're trying to communicate. The board's main concern isn't the location, Marcus said, taking his turn. It's the significant departure from tradition. The Reed Gala has a formula that works. Wealthy people feel special, open their checkbooks, everyone wins. That formula is outdated. Olivia's approach will generate deeper engagement, more meaningful contributions. Marcus's axe struck dead center. Olivia's approach, not yours, not the foundation's. Olivia's. Alexander frowned. Is there a point you're trying to make? You've given her unprecedented control over your foundation's signature event. The board is questioning your judgment. Let them question. The results will speak for themselves. Marcus set down his axe and faced his friend. Alex, I've supported every risk you've taken since we were 22-year-old nobodies with a startup dream. But this isn't just about a gala or even a foundation strategy. You're changing company policies, reconsidering acquisition targets, questioning core business models, all because of conversations with a woman you've known for a month. So, growth requires new perspectives. Growth, yes. Wholesale transformation based on someone else's values? That's something else entirely. Alexander felt a surge of defensiveness. You make it sound like I'm being manipulated. Olivia has never asked me to change anything about my business. Not directly, no. But her approval clearly matters to you in ways that are affecting your decisions. The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. Alexander had recently halted a planned acquisition after realizing it would involve significant workforce reductions, something he'd done numerous times before without hesitation, but now found himself questioning through Olivia's implied lens. Maybe her approval matters because she sees things I've been blind to, he said finally. Is that so terrible? Marcus's expression softened. Not terrible. Just concerning when it happens so quickly, so dramatically. I want you to be sure these changes are truly aligned with your values, not just reactions to her influence. Alexander threw his final axe with more force than necessary. I've spent a decade building this company based on my vision. A few weeks of self-reflection won't unravel that. Fair enough, Marcus conceded. And what about the personal side of this? Where does that stand? Carefully professional, Alexander admitted. We've both maintained boundaries. And is that what you want? Alexander considered the question as they collected their axes. No, he finally said. It's not. Then do something about it. But be clear about your intentions. Olivia Bennett doesn't strike me as someone who appreciates ambiguity. The following morning, Olivia arrived at the office to find a small package on her desk. Inside was a compass in a burnished copper case, beautifully crafted but clearly an antique. With it was a handwritten note. This belonged to my grandfather, a fisherman who navigated by stars and instinct before technology made such skills obsolete. He gave it to me when I left for college, saying that no matter how sophisticated our tools become, there's no substitute for a clear sense of direction. Your moral compass has been recalibrating mine these past weeks. Would you join me for dinner tonight? Not as colleagues, but simply as Olivia and Alexander. 7 p.m. The rooftop at Montrose Gardens, if you're willing. A.R. Olivia stared at the note, her heart racing. This was the conversation Emma had encouraged. Explicit acknowledgement of the personal dimension that had been developing beneath their professional collaboration. The compass was a thoughtful gift, meaningful rather than extravagant, acknowledging the impact she'd had on his thinking. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Did you get it? He had it couriered over first thing. You knew about this? Olivia texted back. He asked me where you'd be comfortable meeting. I vetted the gift concept. You're welcome. I haven't decided if I'm going. Yes, you have. You're just scared. Olivia set down her phone and picked up the compass again, feeling its weight in her palm. Emma was right. She had already decided. The question wasn't whether to go, but what it would mean when she did. She sent a simple text to Alexander. 7 p.m. works. Thank you for the compass. It's beautiful. His reply came immediately. Thank you for considering it. The evening is yours to define. Throughout the day, Olivia found herself both anticipating and dreading the evening ahead. They had spent weeks in each other's company, engaged in substantive conversations about everything from economic justice to educational access. Yet tonight felt like stepping into unknown territory. Without the buffer of professional context, they would simply be a man and woman exploring the connection that had been building between them. Alexander, for his part, was experiencing an unfamiliar nervousness. He had dated countless women, many of them objectively more accomplished or beautiful than Olivia Bennett. Yet none had affected him this way, made him question his assumptions, reconsider his values, look at his life through a different lens. Tonight's dinner wasn't about conquest or even romance in the conventional sense. It was about discovering whether the connection they shared could exist outside the structured environment they'd created around it. As evening approached, both prepared for what felt less like a date and more like a crossroads, a moment that would either open new possibilities or close the chapter on what might have been. The rooftop at Montrose Gardens wasn't what Olivia expected. Rather than one of the sleek, trendy spots that dominated Manhattan's rooftop scene, it was a converted greenhouse atop a historic building, filled with flourishing plants and simple wooden tables. String lights crisscrossed the glass ceiling, and the city spread out below like a carpet of jewels. The space felt intimate despite being open air, with dividers of tall bamboo creating private nooks among the greenery. Alexander was already waiting when she arrived, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him. Dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, no tie, no designer labels visible. He looked younger, more approachable, and Olivia felt a flutter of nervousness that had nothing to do with his wealth or status. He stood when he saw her. "You came." Something in his tone suggested he hadn't been entirely certain she would. "I said I would," she replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "In my experience, people say many things they don't mean, especially to someone in my position." "Well, I'm not people, and I don't care about your position." Alexander smiled. "That's exactly why I'm here." A server appeared with 2 glasses of wine. "I took the liberty of ordering this," Alexander said. "It's from a small vineyard in the Hudson Valley. Sustainable practices, worker-owned cooperative. I thought you might approve." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "You've been doing research." "Let's call it continuing education." He raised his glass. "To leaving titles and positions at the door." She clinked her glass against his. Just Olivia and Alexander. The wine was excellent, bright and complex, with none of the pretension she associated with fine dining. Like this place, like Alexander himself tonight, it defied her expectations. "I'm curious," she said after her first sip. "Why this place? It's not exactly what I imagined when you suggested dinner." "What did you imagine? Crystal chandeliers and gold flatware?" "Something like that, or a restaurant where the chef comes to your table and calls you by name." Alexander laughed. "I know plenty of those places, but tonight isn't about impressing you with access or exclusivity. This place," he gestured to the lush surroundings, "it has significance to me." "How so?" His expression turned reflective. "When I first moved to New York, I was broke but determined. I worked 3 jobs while trying to launch my first startup. One of those jobs was here, helping the original owner maintain the plants. I'd come before dawn to water and prune, then head to my other gigs. It was exhausting, but peaceful. I'd watch the sun rise over the city and feel like anything was possible." Olivia tried to picture Alexander as a struggling entrepreneur, working manual jobs to make ends meet. It contradicted the polished CEO image he projected to the world, yet somehow felt more authentic than any version of him she'd encountered previously. "It's hard to imagine you watering plants for minimum wage," she admitted. "Not just watering. I learned about each species, what it needed to thrive, how to diagnose problems, when to intervene and when to let nature take its course." His eyes met hers. "Valuable lessons for business and life. Is that why you brought me here? To show me where you got your start?" "Partly, but also because when I finally achieved success, I bought this building to preserve the garden. The previous owner was facing eviction as developers wanted to convert it to yet another exclusive club. I couldn't let that happen. So you saved it." "I gave it a chance to continue serving its purpose, yes. We opened it to the public, established a training program for disadvantaged youth to learn urban agriculture. It's not charity. It's sustaining something valuable that the market would have eliminated." Olivia felt a shift in her perception of him. Another layer revealed beyond the billionaire businessman. Why isn't this story in your public profile? It humanizes you in a way all those Forbes features never could. Alexander shrugged. Some things I keep private. The narrative of ruthless business genius serves its purpose in boardrooms and negotiations, but it's not the complete picture. What else does that picture include? She asked softly. As they shared a simple but exquisite meal of locally sourced ingredients, Alexander told her about growing up in Boston with a single mother who worked cleaning homes, about the community center director who recognized his aptitude for mathematics and pushed him to apply for scholarships, about sleeping on friends' couches during his first year in New York because he couldn't afford rent and wanted to save every penny for his business. In turn, Olivia shared more about her childhood following her father from union meetings to community actions, about the devastating impact of the factory closure on her hometown, about her decision to pursue marketing as a way to amplify voices that often went unheard. You could do that work more directly, Alexander noted. Activism, politics, nonprofit leadership. I considered all of those paths, but I realized marketing is how modern consciousness is shaped. If you want to change hearts and minds, you need to understand how communication actually works, not just how we wish it worked. Pragmatic idealism, I like that. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on books, films, places they'd traveled, childhood memories. The normal exchange of two people getting to know each other, yet infused with an underlying tension that had nothing to do with their professional connection and everything to do with the attraction simmering between them. As dessert arrived, a simple berry tart with herbs grown in the rooftop garden, Alexander said, "May I ask you something personal?" Olivia nodded, curious. "Why did you agree to come tonight? After working so hard to maintain professional boundaries?" She considered her answer carefully. "Because despite my best efforts, I find myself thinking about you beyond our professional interactions, and I needed to know if that was just the allure of your world, or something more substantial." "And what have you concluded?" "That I'm still figuring it out." She met his gaze directly. "Your turn. Why did you pursue me, when there are countless women who would be far less challenging?" Alexander leaned forward slightly. "Because those women aren't interested in me. They're interested in what I represent. Wealth, power, status. You're the first person in years who seems completely unimpressed by those things, who challenges me to justify not just my actions but the thinking behind them. That doesn't sound particularly enjoyable. On the contrary, it's exhilarating." His expression was earnest, almost vulnerable. "Do you know how rare it is for someone in my position to be contradicted, to have assumptions questioned? Everyone says yes, agrees with whatever I suggest, laughs at my jokes even when they aren't funny." "That sounds lonely," Olivia said, surprised by her own empathy. "It is. Successful, but lonely." Alexander's hand rested on the table between them, not reaching for hers but close enough that she felt the possibility like an electric current. "Until someone comes along who isn't afraid to say no, who sees the person behind the position." The moment hung between them, charged with potential. Olivia was acutely aware of a decision point approaching, whether to retreat behind safe boundaries or acknowledge the connection that had been building between them. Before she could decide, her phone buzzed with an urgent message. Normally, she would ignore it, but the triple vibration indicated an emergency from someone in her priority contacts. "I'm sorry, I should check this," she said, reaching for her phone. It was Emma. "SOS. Simmons is having emergency meeting about gala, threatening to pull your team off project, called in legal. Get here now." Olivia's stomach dropped. "I have to go. There's a crisis at the office with the gala project." Alexander frowned. "At this hour? What's happened?" "I don't know details, but Simmons has legal involved and is threatening to remove my team." She stood, gathering her things. "I'm sorry to cut this short." "I'm coming with you," Alexander said, already signaling for the check. "Whatever this is, it involves my foundation." 20 minutes later, they arrived at the Carson Group offices, the relaxed intimacy of their dinner replaced by tense professionalism. Several lights were on in the executive floor despite the late hour. As they exited the elevator, Emma rushed over, her expression a mix of relief and anxiety. "Thank God you're here. They're in the main conference room. Simmons is on the warpath." "What happened?" Olivia asked. One of the board members saw the preliminary budget for the warehouse venue and went ballistic, called it wasteful virtue signaling, and demanded immediate intervention. Simmons is trying to salvage the relationship by promising to restore the traditional format. Olivia felt a surge of anger. "Without even consulting me, the project lead?" "That's why I texted. They're meeting with traditional vendors right now, preparing to scrap everything we've done." Alexander's expression had shifted to the cool, authoritative demeanor Olivia recognized from his professional settings. "Let's address this immediately." They entered the conference room to find Simmons, 2 board members, and several vendors reviewing materials at a table scattered with floor plans and sample menus. Everyone froze when Alexander and Olivia appeared. "Mr. Reed," Simmons stammered, rising quickly. "We didn't expect you. We were just reviewing some options. Options that apparently involve dismantling a project I personally approved," Alexander said, his voice deceptively calm. "Without consulting the project director I specifically appointed." One of the board members, an older man with the confident posture of old money, spoke up. "Alexander, be reasonable. This warehouse concept may be fashionable, but it's not appropriate for our donor base. Lady Cunningham was positively aghast when I described it to her." "Lady Cunningham has declined to increase her donation for the past 5 years, despite her net worth tripling in that time," Alexander replied coolly. "Perhaps she should be aghast at that fact instead." The tension in the room was palpable. Olivia stepped forward. "If there are specific concerns about the budget or approach, I'm happy to address them directly, but dismantling the project without discussion isn't acceptable." "Ms. Bennett," Simmons said with forced patience, "this is a matter for the Foundation Board and executive leadership. Your team's creative input has been valuable, but ultimately—" "Ms. Bennett is the project director," Alexander interrupted. "Approved by me as CEO of the parent company and primary foundation donor. Her authority on this matter is absolute, short of my direct intervention, which, to be clear, would only be to support her vision, not undermine it." The board members exchanged glances, clearly not expecting such firm backing. Simmons looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. "Mr. Reed, could we perhaps discuss this privately?" he suggested. "There's nothing to discuss. The gala will proceed as Ms. Bennett has outlined, with the full support of Reed Enterprises and my personal endorsement. Any further attempts to circumvent her authority will be considered a direct challenge to mine. Is that perfectly clear?" The silence that followed was broken only by Emma's poorly disguised cough that sounded suspiciously like badass. Eventually, Simmons nodded. "Perfectly clear, sir. We were merely exploring contingencies." "Those contingencies are no longer needed. This meeting is over." Alexander's tone left no room for argument. As the room cleared, with vendors hurriedly packing up materials and board members making stiff farewells, Olivia stood in stunned silence. She had never seen Alexander use his authority so directly, so forcefully, and he had done it to defend her vision. When they were alone except for Emma, who was pretending to organize papers while obviously eavesdropping, Alexander turned to Olivia. "I apologize for speaking on your behalf," he said, his voice returning to the gentler tone from dinner. "That isn't usually my style." "It was effective," Olivia admitted. "Thank you for the support." "It wasn't just support. It was the right thing to do." He glanced at his watch. "Our evening was interrupted rather dramatically. Perhaps we could reschedule." The corporate power play she had just witnessed complicated her already conflicted feelings. Alexander had defended her, yes, but he had also demonstrated exactly the kind of unilateral authority she found problematic in principle. even when exercised in her favor. "I need some time to process this," she said honestly. "Tonight was already pushing my boundaries. Then this—" He nodded, respecting her hesitation. "I understand. For what it's worth, I enjoyed our dinner tremendously, political maneuvering notwithstanding." "So did I," she admitted. "More than I expected to." Emma, abandoning all pretense of not listening, looked between them with undisguised interest. "I'll leave you to deal with the aftermath," Alexander said, gesturing to the scattered meeting materials. "But Olivia, our conversation isn't finished. When you're ready." After he left, Emma practically pounced. "What happened at dinner? And more importantly, what was that? He basically declared corporate war to protect your project." Olivia sank into a chair, emotionally exhausted from the evening's dramatic shifts. "It's complicated. You keep saying that, but I just watched Alexander Reed burn down conventional corporate hierarchy to defend your vision. That seems pretty straightforward to me." "Is it? He exercised exactly the kind of unilateral power I've always criticized. The fact that he used it to support me doesn't change what it represents." Emma considered this. "Or maybe it does. Power itself isn't the problem, it's how it's used. Tonight he used it to protect something meaningful against people who wanted to revert to safe, shallow tradition." Olivia wasn't entirely convinced, but Emma's perspective gave her pause. What if power, like wealth, wasn't inherently problematic, but contextual? What if Alexander was demonstrating exactly how privilege could be leveraged for positive change? And beyond these philosophical questions was a more immediate concern: the undeniable attraction she felt toward him, complicated now by gratitude, admiration, and lingering uneasiness about the dramatic power imbalance between them. "I need to focus on salvaging the project," she said finally. "Personal considerations will have to wait." But as she gathered her things to leave, the memory of Alexander's words echoed in her mind. "Our conversation isn't finished. When you're ready." The question was, would she ever be truly ready to navigate the complex territory that lay between them? The next morning, Olivia arrived at the office to find a handwritten note on her desk with the Reed Enterprises letterhead. The message was brief, but significant. "To all Carson Group staff, effective immediately, all decisions regarding the Reed Foundation Gala will be made exclusively by Olivia Bennett and her designated team. Any attempts to circumvent this authority will result in immediate review of employment status. This directive comes directly from the office of Alexander Reed, CEO." Below the formal message was a personal addition in Alexander's distinctive handwriting. "Removing obstacles. Hope this helps rather than complicates. A." Olivia stared at the note, unsure whether to be grateful for the support or concerned about the implications. Before she could decide, Emma appeared at her door with 2 coffee cups and an excited expression. "Have you seen the email that just went out? Reed basically gave you immunity from corporate politics. Simmons looks like he swallowed a lemon." She handed Olivia a coffee. "Also, the office is buzzing with rumors about you two leaving together last night and arriving together at the emergency meeting. We were having dinner when your text came in," Olivia explained. "It made sense to travel together." "Dinner," Emma repeated meaningfully. "As in a date?" "As in 2 adults having a conversation outside of work hours. At one of the most romantic spots in the city." Olivia sighed. The location had personal significance for him. It wasn't about romance. "Sure, and the way he looked at you during that showdown was purely professional." Emma perched on the edge of the desk. "Come on, Liv. Something is happening between you two. Why not admit it?" Before Olivia could respond, her phone rang. Alexander's private line. Emma wiggled her eyebrows suggestively and backed toward the door, mouthing, "Take it," as she left. Olivia answered with professional formality. "Good morning, Mr. Reed." "Back to Mr. Reed, I see," Alexander replied, a smile evident in his voice. I hope my note didn't overstep. It's a bit authoritarian. Necessary, given the circumstances. Simmons needed a clear message that undermining you means undermining me. And the personal note? That was just me, checking in, making sure you're okay after last night's drama. Olivia softened slightly. I'm fine. The team is energized, actually. Nothing motivates creative people like attempts to shut them down. Good. About our interrupted dinner. I think we should focus on the gala for now, she interjected. It's only 5 weeks away, and we have a lot to accomplish. A pause, then, of course, professional priorities first. But Olivia, the conversation we started is important to me. I hope we can continue it soon. After they hung up, Olivia stared at the compass he had given her, which now sat on her desk beside her computer. It was becoming a totem of sorts, a reminder that even established paths sometimes require recalibration. For the next 2 weeks, they maintained strictly professional interactions. The gala planning accelerated, with Olivia's team transforming the warehouse space into a powerful, immersive experience. Alexander attended key meetings, provided resources when needed, but respected her leadership completely. If others noticed the careful distance between them, no one mentioned it. Until Marcus Whitman arrived at Olivia's office, unannounced one afternoon. Ms. Bennett? Marcus Whitman, Reed Enterprises CFO. Do you have a moment? Olivia had met Marcus briefly at previous meetings, but had never spoken with him directly. His presence in her office was unexpected and slightly concerning. Of course, Mr. Whitman. How can I help you? He closed the door before sitting down. This is somewhat delicate. It's about Alexander. Her guard immediately went up. Mr. Reed and I have a professional working relationship focused on the gala project. I'm aware of the official narrative, Marcus said with a knowing look. I'm also aware that my best friend hasn't been himself since he met you. Hence this unusual conversation. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating directly that Alexander is emotionally invested in you in ways that are affecting his business decisions. As his friend, I'm concerned. As his CFO, I'm alarmed. Olivia felt a surge of indignation. If you're suggesting I'm manipulating him, not intentionally perhaps, but your influence is undeniable. Marcus leaned forward. Last week, he halted an acquisition that's been in planning for months because the restructuring would eliminate jobs. Yesterday, he announced a company-wide minimum wage increase to what he called dignity levels, nearly double industry standards. The board is in panic mode. Those sound like ethical decisions, Olivia pointed out. They're dramatic departures from established strategy, implemented suddenly without the usual analysis. That's not like him. Maybe he's evolving his thinking. At remarkable speed, coinciding precisely with your arrival in his life. Marcus studied her carefully. What exactly do you want from him, Ms. Bennett? The question caught her off guard. I don't want anything from him. Everyone wants something from Alexander Reed. Position, investment, influence, legitimacy, or perhaps ideological conversion? Olivia stood, anger rising. This conversation is inappropriate. I've never asked Alexander to change his business practices or personal beliefs. Whatever decisions he's making are his own. Marcus remained seated, unperturbed by her reaction. People in Alexander's position are surrounded by those who want something. It's a reality he's lived with since his first success. The difference is, you've affected him without even trying. That makes you either the most genuine person in his life or the most dangerous. I don't appreciate being analyzed like some potential threat. Understandable. But consider this from my perspective. My friend is making impulsive decisions that contradict years of carefully constructed business strategy, all while becoming increasingly preoccupied with someone who represents values fundamentally opposed to the system that built his success. Olivia felt a chill at the accuracy of his assessment. She had noticed Alexander integrating her perspectives, citing their conversations in meetings, questioning practices he once took for granted. But she had never asked him to do so, never pushed an agenda beyond the specific gala project. "What do you want from me, Mr. Whitman?" she asked finally. He stood, straightening his impeccable suit. "Clarity. If you genuinely care for him, acknowledge the relationship openly rather than maintaining this professional charade. If not, create appropriate distance. The current ambiguity is destabilizing him professionally and personally. That's between Alexander and me. Under normal circumstances, yes. But when his personal uncertainty affects 12,000 employees and billions in market value, it becomes a broader concern." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I've never seen him like this about anyone. Whatever's happening between you is real. The question is whether it's sustainable." After Marcus left, Olivia sat in stunned silence, processing his words. Was she unconsciously influencing Alexander's business decisions? Was the careful distance she'd maintained actually making things worse by creating uncertainty? She picked up the compass, turning it over in her hands. The needle swung steadily north, unaffected by her inner turmoil. If only human hearts were so reliably oriented. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Warehouse inspection at 4 p.m.? Need your final approval on several installations?" Such a normal professional request, yet now freighted with implications she couldn't ignore. She replied simply, "I'll be there." The warehouse was buzzing with activity when she arrived. Contractors installing lighting, carpenters building custom displays, artists creating murals that would tell the stories of community impact. The transformation from abandoned industrial space to meaningful venue was well underway. She found Alexander in what would become the central gathering area, reviewing technical specifications with the production team. He was in full CEO mode, focused, decisive, commanding. Yet when he saw her, his expression softened momentarily before returning to professional neutrality. "Olivia, perfect timing. We need your input on the multimedia installation." They spent the next hour moving through the space, addressing various decisions that needed finalization. Their interaction was seamlessly professional, yet Olivia was acutely aware of the undercurrents flowing beneath the surface. The careful distance they maintained, the weighted pauses in conversation, the brief moments when their eyes met for a second too long. Finally, after the various teams had dispersed to continue their work, they found themselves alone in what would become the reflection garden overlooking the East River. The space had been cleared of debris, with temporary flooring installed and native plants beginning to define the area. The Manhattan skyline provided a stunning backdrop as the late afternoon sun cast golden light across the water. "It's coming together beautifully," Alexander said, looking not at the view, but at her. "Your vision is transforming this place." "Our vision," she corrected. "This has been a true collaboration. One that's nearly complete." He turned to face her fully. "What happens after the gala, Olivia?" The question hung between them, ostensibly about professional matters but clearly addressing the personal dimension they'd been carefully avoiding. "Marcus came to see me today," she said instead of answering directly. Alexander's expression tightened. "Did he? What did my well-intentioned but overstepping CFO have to say?" "He thinks I'm destabilizing you, affecting your business decisions. Marcus should focus on numbers and leave personal matters to me." "Is he wrong?" Olivia asked quietly. "Have I been influencing your decisions?" Alexander considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "You've influenced my thinking, certainly. You've challenged assumptions I've held for years. But every decision I've made has been my own, based on reassessment of values and priorities. Reassessment that coincidentally began when we met. Not coincidence, catalyst." He moved closer, still maintaining a respectful distance but decreasing the space between them. "You haven't manipulated me, Olivia. You've awakened parts of me that success and routine had numbed. The part that questions, that seeks meaning beyond profit, that remembers why I started building in the first place. And what happens when the novelty wears off, when challenging conversations become tiresome rather than stimulating, when the business impacts of dignity wages affect quarterly reports. Alexander's gaze was steady, unwavering. You're asking if this is temporary, if you're a phase I'm going through that I'll outgrow when reality reasserts itself. It's a valid question. It is, and I don't have a guaranteed answer, because life doesn't offer those. He paused. But I know that in the weeks since we met, I've felt more alive, more purposeful, more connected to what matters than I have in years. That doesn't feel temporary to me. Olivia felt her carefully constructed walls weakening. Alexander, there are fundamental differences in how we see the world. Are there? Or are there differences in our experiences that have led to different conclusions about similar values? He took another step closer. We both believe in dignity, in purpose, in creating meaningful impact. We've approached those values from different paths, but the core is remarkably aligned. As the sun began to set, casting them in amber light, Olivia realized they had reached another crossroads, perhaps the most significant one yet. The professional project that had brought them together was nearing completion. The careful boundaries they had established were proving insufficient to contain whatever was growing between them. I don't have answers, she admitted finally. This is uncharted territory for me. For me as well, Alexander said softly. But I'm willing to explore it. Together. No expectations, no presumptions. Just two people seeing where this leads. He held out his hand, not grabbing, not assuming, but offering. A choice. Her choice. Olivia looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face, open and vulnerable in a way she'd never seen from him before. The compass in her pocket seemed to weigh heavier, as if reminding her of its presence. Some journeys required more than navigation tools. They required courage. Olivia took Alexander's hand. The simple gesture carried the weight of a decision far more significant than it appeared. His fingers closed gently around hers, warm and solid, and something shifted in the air between them. An acknowledgement of boundaries crossed, possibilities opened. I'm not promising anything, she said softly. I still have concerns. I wouldn't expect otherwise. His smile was gentle. Unexamined certainty isn't your style. They stood there as the sunset painted Manhattan in shades of gold and rose, still holding hands, neither rushing to define whatever was happening between them. It was a moment of perfect balance, tentative yet profound, cautious yet brave. Finally, Olivia spoke. We should focus on completing the gala. After that, we can see where this leads. Agreed. Alexander reluctantly released her hand as voices approached, workers returning to continue the installation. Dinner tomorrow? My place. I'll cook. Olivia raised an eyebrow. You cook? Another hidden talent from my pre-billionaire days. Nothing fancy, but edible. I'd like that. As they returned to professional mode, discussing final details with the production team, Olivia felt both terrified and exhilarated. She had just opened a door she wasn't sure she was ready to walk through, yet the prospect of seeing what lay on the other side filled her with unexpected anticipation. The next evening, Alexander's driver collected her from her Brooklyn apartment. As the car crossed the bridge into Manhattan, Olivia's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Enjoy your date with the billionaire. If he proposes, remember who encouraged this from the beginning. Olivia smiled despite her nervousness. Emma's enthusiasm was relentless, but her support had been invaluable throughout this unexpected journey. When the car pulled up to Alexander's building, Olivia half expected a glittering high-rise with doormen in livery. Instead, she found herself in front of a converted industrial building in Tribeca. Upscale, certainly, but with an understated elegance that surprised her. The doorman who greeted her wore a simple uniform and knew her name without checking any list. Mr. Reed is expecting you, Ms. Bennett. Top floor. The private elevator opened directly into Alexander's penthouse, and Olivia stepped out to find him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. Classical music played softly in the background, and the space smelled of garlic and herbs. "You really do cook," she said, announcing her presence. He looked up with a smile that transformed his face, the CEO completely gone, replaced by a man genuinely happy to see her. "I really do. Though I'll admit I'm out of practice." Olivia took in the space as she approached the kitchen island. Like the building itself, Alexander's home was a study in understated luxury. Open concept with exposed brick walls, warm wood floors, and large windows showcasing the city lights. The furniture was clearly expensive but comfortable rather than showy, and art covered the walls, not the status pieces she might have expected, but eclectic works that looked chosen for personal resonance. Most surprising were the books, hundreds of them on built-in shelves, worn paperbacks mixed with leather-bound volumes, clearly read rather than displayed. "Not what you expected?" Alexander asked, noticing her survey of the space. "Not entirely," she admitted, "though I'm learning to stop expecting things from you." He handed her a glass of wine. "That sounds like progress." The dinner he prepared was simple but perfect. Pasta with fresh vegetables and herbs, crusty bread, a salad of greens that he admitted came from the Montrose Gardens rooftop. They ate at the kitchen island rather than the formal dining table, the casual setting enhancing the sense of genuine connection. "So," Alexander said as they finished the meal, "you've seen where I work, where I eat, and now where I live. Fair exchange suggests I should see your apartment next." "My entire place would fit in your kitchen," Olivia said with a laugh. "And it's not nearly as well decorated. But it's yours. It's part of your story." He refilled their glasses. "I want to know that story beyond what research can tell me." "Why?" The question was direct, honest. Alexander considered it seriously. "Because you've shown me parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. Because you challenge me without diminishing me. Because when I'm with you, the world feels more substantial, more meaningful." His honesty disarmed her. "That's a lot to put on someone you've known for a relatively short time." "It is," he agreed. "Too much?" "I don't know yet." Olivia set down her glass. "This is unfamiliar territory for me, Alexander. I've spent years defining myself in opposition to wealth and power. Now I'm sitting in a billionaire's penthouse, enjoying his company, questioning assumptions I've held for a long time. Welcome to my experience these past weeks." His smile was wry. Questioning long-held assumptions is uncomfortable but necessary for growth. And what if we grow in different directions? What if, after the novelty fades, we find ourselves on fundamentally opposing sides again? Alexander reached across the counter, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Then we'll have had an honest exchange that made both of us more thoughtful, more nuanced in our understanding of the world. That seems worthwhile, regardless of outcome." Later, as they stood by the windows overlooking the city, the conversation turned to the approaching gala. "The board is still nervous," Alexander admitted. "They're predicting donor revolt, embarrassment, disaster." "And you?" Olivia asked, studying his profile against the city lights. "I believe in your vision, and even if some traditional donors balk, opening the foundation to new supporters and perspectives will strengthen it in the long run." "Marcus might disagree. He seems concerned about your recent epiphanies." Alexander turned to face her. "Marcus has been with me since the beginning. He's protective of me and what we've built. But he'll adapt as he sees that these changes aren't impulsive but evolutionary." "Are they? Evolutionary rather than revolutionary?" "I think so." He moved closer. "I'm not abandoning capitalism or success, Olivia. I'm rediscovering purpose within it, remembering that wealth is a tool, not an end in itself." She felt the familiar flutter in her stomach as he approached, but didn't step back. "And what is the end itself? What's the purpose?" "Making a positive difference, creating something meaningful, connecting authentically with others. His voice softened. With you, specifically, at the moment. The air between them charged with possibility. They had been circling each other for weeks, maintaining professional distance despite growing personal connection. Now, with that barrier deliberately lowered, the attraction between them was palpable. Alexander's hand rose to gently touch her cheek, a question in his eyes. Olivia answered by closing the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened with weeks of suppressed longing. Time seemed to suspend as they finally acknowledged the desire that had been building since their first contentious meeting. His arms encircled her waist as hers wound around his neck, pulling each other closer, the kiss expressing what words had struggled to capture. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since you first told me off in that cafe." "Even then?" Olivia asked with a small laugh. "Especially then? You were magnificent in your righteous indignation." She stepped back slightly, needing space to think clearly. The intensity of her reaction to him was both thrilling and alarming. "This complicates things. Only if we let it." He took her hands in his. "The gala is in 2 weeks. Let's focus on that professionally, while allowing this," he gestured between them, "to develop naturally, without pressure or expectations." "Can we really separate the two so neatly?" "Probably not entirely, but we can try." He smiled. "I'm willing if you are." As she left his apartment later that evening, Olivia felt as though she'd crossed some invisible threshold. The kiss they'd shared had confirmed what she'd been trying to deny. Her feelings for Alexander went far beyond professional respect or intellectual fascination. There was a connection between them that defied easy categorization or rational analysis. The driver took her back to Brooklyn in comfortable silence as she processed the evening. When she reached her apartment, she found a text waiting on her phone, sent moments after she'd left his building. "Thank you for taking a chance on the unknown. Sleep well. A." The simple message made her smile despite her lingering uncertainties. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of final gala preparations, interspersed with moments of personal connection. During the day, they maintained professional boundaries, working with their respective teams to ensure every detail of the event was perfect. Evenings often found them together, sometimes at his place, occasionally at small neighborhood restaurants near her apartment, once at a hidden jazz club he'd frequented during his early New York days. They were careful to keep their developing relationship private, though Emma had immediately noticed the change in Olivia's demeanor, and Marcus had given Alexander knowing looks during meetings. The night before the gala, they met at the warehouse for final inspections, the space now completely transformed from abandoned industrial building to immersive experience. "It's remarkable," Alexander said as they walked through the finished installation. "Better than I imagined." Each zone of the warehouse told the story of a different community need: education, housing, healthcare, environmental justice, through interactive exhibitions that highlighted both challenges and solutions. Participants would move through the experiences before reaching the reflection garden, where they could consider their response. Gone were the crystal chandeliers and champagne fountains of previous galas. In their place was something far more authentic, and potentially far more impactful. "Are you nervous?" Olivia asked as they stood in the completed garden overlooking the river. "About the gala? No? About how it might change philanthropy at this level? A little. About us?" Alexander took her hand. "Definitely." His honesty continued to disarm her. "At least we're nervous together. That's something." He squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens tomorrow with the gala or with us, I want you to know that meeting you has changed me, Olivia. For the better." She turned to face him fully. "It's changed me too. I'm still figuring out exactly how, but I know it has." Under the stars with Manhattan glittering across the water, they shared a quiet moment of connection before the public scrutiny that would come with tomorrow's event. The gala would be a test not only of their professional vision but of their personal relationship, placing both in the spotlight simultaneously. As if reading her thoughts, Alexander said, "Tomorrow, we focus entirely on making the event successful. We've worked too hard to let anything distract from that." "Agreed," Olivia nodded. "Professional first, personal later." After the gala, he continued, "Regardless of how it's received, I'd like us to take some time away. Just us, no work, no distractions, to figure out what this is becoming." The invitation hung in the air, not just for a weekend away, but for an acknowledgement that whatever was happening between them deserved serious consideration, intentional space, and honest exploration. "Where would we go?" she asked, neither accepting nor declining. "Wherever you want. I have a cabin in the Catskills. Simple, remote. Or we could go anywhere in the world." Olivia smiled. "Let's see how tomorrow goes first, one life-changing event at a time." As they left the warehouse, locking up for the final time before tomorrow's transformation, both felt the weight of anticipation. The gala represented months of work, a bold reimagining of what philanthropy could be, and a public statement about values and priorities. But beyond that professional milestone loomed personal questions that were far more challenging to answer. Tomorrow, the worlds they had been carefully balancing would collide publicly, and after that, the unknown, with all its terrifying possibility. The day of the gala arrived with the controlled chaos typical of major events. Olivia had been at the warehouse since dawn, coordinating final details, directing staff, and solving last-minute problems. Her team had transformed the space exactly as envisioned, each zone telling powerful stories through immersive experiences. The central gathering area prepared for brief presentations rather than lengthy speeches. The reflection garden serene and contemplative above the East River. By late afternoon, Olivia retreated to a small makeshift office to change from practical work clothes into her evening attire, a simple but elegant emerald dress that Emma had insisted was CEO-worthy without trying too hard. As she applied minimal makeup, her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. Board members arriving, bracing for initial reactions. "You've created something extraordinary here." The message fortified her. Tonight would be controversial for many traditional donors, but she believed in their vision. This wasn't about comfort or tradition. It was about authentic engagement with causes deserving more than performative charity. At precisely 6 o'clock, the first guests began to arrive. Rather than the typical red carpet entrance with photographers documenting designer gowns and expensive jewelry, attendees were guided through a multimedia experience, showing the daily realities of those the foundation aimed to help. Expressions ranged from discomfort to genuine interest as billionaires and celebrities experienced stories of struggle without the usual sanitizing filter. Olivia watched from a discreet monitoring station, observing how different groups moved through the space. Some engaged deeply, reading every panel and participating in interactive elements. Others moved quickly, clearly eager to reach familiar territory of cocktails and networking. Most fell somewhere between, initially skeptical, but increasingly drawn into the stories being told. Alexander worked the room with practiced ease, personally greeting key donors and board members, smoothly addressing concerns while emphasizing the purpose behind this new approach. He was the perfect bridge between old philanthropy and new, respected by the traditional power structure while advocating for meaningful change. They had agreed to maintain professional distance during the event, focusing entirely on their respective roles. Yet Olivia found her eyes drawn to him repeatedly, admiring his skillful navigation of complex social dynamics. Occasionally, their gazes would meet across the room, a moment of private connection amid the public spectacle. An hour into the event, with most guests now moved through the experiential zones, Alexander took the small central stage for brief opening remarks. The traditional gala speech, typically 20 minutes of self-congratulation and vague promises, had been replaced by a concise 5-minute welcome. For 15 years, he began, the Reed Foundation has hosted this annual gathering. We've raised millions for worthy causes, celebrated generosity, and enjoyed each other's company in luxurious surroundings. He paused, surveying the crowd. But tonight, we're asking something more challenging of ourselves. Not just to give, but to understand. Not just to celebrate, but to reflect. Not just to attend, but to engage. Olivia watched from the side, heart swelling with unexpected emotion as Alexander articulated the vision they had developed together over the past months. His voice carried authority but also genuine conviction. This wasn't mere performance. The experiences you've walked through tonight aren't comfortable. They aren't meant to be. They represent real challenges facing real people in communities often invisible to many of us in this room. Your discomfort is valuable. It's the beginning of authentic understanding. He continued, explaining how the evening would unfold differently than previous galas, with opportunities for direct conversation with community leaders, transparent information about how donations would be used, and commitments beyond financial contributions. Tonight isn't about recognition or social obligation, he concluded. It's about meaningful impact. It's about connecting our resources. Financial, yes, but also our networks, our influence, our attention, with the communities that can use them most effectively. I invite you to approach this evening with open minds and hearts. The team that created this experience, led by the remarkable Olivia Bennett, has given us a gift, the opportunity to move beyond transactional philanthropy to transformational engagement. As conversations resumed and guests moved toward various interactive stations, Olivia found herself approached by board members and major donors, some curious, others clearly skeptical. "Bold choice, this warehouse," commented an older woman Olivia recognized as a significant foundation supporter. "Though I must say that education exhibit was rather eye-opening. I had no idea about the disparity in resources between schools just miles apart." "That was precisely the goal," Olivia replied, "making abstract statistics concrete and personal." "Alexander has always had unconventional instincts," the woman continued, studying Olivia with shrewd eyes, "though this is radical even for him. Your influence, I presume?" Before Olivia could formulate a diplomatic response, Alexander appeared beside her. "Lady Cunningham, I see you've met Olivia Bennett, the creative force behind tonight's transformation." "We were just discussing your departure from tradition," Lady Cunningham said. "Quite a statement you're making." "The statement comes from the communities themselves," Alexander replied smoothly. "We're simply creating space for their voices." "Indeed." Lady Cunningham's gaze moved between them, noting something in their body language that Olivia feared was obvious to others as well. "Well, Ms. Bennett, you've certainly made an impression. On the foundation and—" her eyes twinkled knowingly. "Elsewhere, it seems." As she moved away, Alexander touched Olivia's elbow lightly. "Everything's running perfectly. The Housing Zone exhibit has 3 board members in deep conversation with community advocates. I've never seen anything like it." "People are actually engaging," Olivia agreed, "not just networking or posing for photos." "You were right about all of it." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than was strictly professional. "I should circulate. More skeptics to convince." As the evening progressed, Olivia noticed a fascinating shift occurring. Initial discomfort was giving way to genuine engagement. Wealthy donors who had arrived expecting the usual performative philanthropy were having meaningful conversations with community advocates. Tech executives were offering expertise along with funding. Real estate developers were being challenged on gentrification by the very communities they affected. It wasn't universally embraced. Olivia overheard plenty of critical comments about politicizing charity and unnecessary guilt trips. Several longtime donors made early exits, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontational nature of some exhibits. But others who had never attended before were arriving, drawn by word of mouth about this unconventional approach. The reflection garden had become particularly powerful. Olivia observed guests sitting quietly, contemplating the Manhattan skyline, writing commitments on cards that would be publicly displayed and followed up on quarterly. This wasn't ephemeral charity, but sustained engagement. "Ms. Bennett?" A voice interrupted her observations. She turned to find Marcus Whitman, Alexander's CFO and friend, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He offered her one. Impressive execution, very different from previous years. "Thank you," she replied, accepting the glass cautiously. Their last interaction had been confrontational, with Marcus questioning her influence on Alexander. "I was skeptical," he admitted, "about the concept and, frankly, about you. I remember. But watching tonight," he gestured toward the main space where Alexander was deep in conversation with a diverse group that included both billionaire investors and community organizers. "This isn't just different, it's better, more honest." That was the intention. Marcus studied her over his champagne glass. He's different too. More purposeful. More himself. Somehow. He paused. "I've known Alexander since college. Supported him through every venture, every risk. But I've never seen him like this." "Is that good or bad?" Olivia asked directly. "I'm still deciding." Marcus's smile was unexpectedly warm. "But I'm leaning toward good. Whatever's happening between you two, it seems to be bringing out his best self. The man I knew before success complicated everything." Before she could respond, Emma appeared, slightly breathless with excitement. "Liv, you need to see this. The pledges coming in aren't just financial. CEOs are committing to policy changes, hiring initiatives, community investments. This is going beyond anything we anticipated." As Emma pulled her away to see the developing commitment board, Olivia caught Marcus watching her with thoughtful consideration. Perhaps Alexander's oldest friend was finally seeing what Alexander himself had recognized: that challenging perspectives could strengthen rather than threaten. By midnight, the formal program had concluded, though many guests remained engaged in conversations throughout the space. Preliminary numbers showed financial donations exceeding previous years by nearly 30%, with additional commitments of time, resources, and policy changes that were harder to quantify but potentially more impactful. Olivia found Alexander in the now quiet reflection garden, alone, looking out over the water. She joined him silently, standing beside him as they both absorbed the evening's success. "We did it," she said finally. "You did it," he corrected gently. "This was your vision. Our execution. You took a tremendous risk backing something so different." Alexander turned to face her, the city lights illuminating his profile. "The best decision I've made in years, professionally and personally." The distinction hung between them, acknowledging the dual nature of their connection. For months, they had balanced professional collaboration with growing personal feelings. Tonight had demonstrated the power of their professional partnership. What remained was determining the potential of their personal relationship. "There's talk," Olivia said quietly. "People noticing something between us. Does that concern you?" She considered the question seriously. "Less than I expected it to. Tonight proved we can create something meaningful together without compromising either of our values." "Is that what you were afraid of? Compromise?" "Partly. I was afraid that either I would bend too much to your world or you would make superficial changes to appease me. Instead," she gestured to the transformed warehouse around them. "Instead, we found a third path, something neither of us would have created alone." A comfortable silence fell between them, the evening's success creating a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose that transcended their different backgrounds and initial judgments. "The cabin offer still stands," Alexander said finally. "Time away to figure out what this is becoming. No pressure, no expectations." Olivia felt the weight of the decision. The gala's success had proven their professional compatibility, but a personal relationship would mean navigating far more complex territory, different worlds, public scrutiny, the power imbalance they could never entirely eliminate. Yet standing beside him, looking at what they had created together, she found herself less afraid of those challenges than before. Perhaps some journeys were worth taking precisely because the destination was uncertain. "When would we leave?" she asked, neither confirming nor declining, but opening the door to possibility. Alexander's smile held relief and anticipation in equal measure. "Whenever you're ready." As the last guest departed and the cleanup crew began their work, Olivia and Alexander stood in the garden a moment longer, the success of the evening surrounding them, the potential of what might come next, stretching before them like the glittering horizon of the city they both loved. Tomorrow would bring media coverage, board reactions, public scrutiny, the full accounting of their professional gamble. But tonight, in this quiet moment between ending and beginning, they allowed themselves to acknowledge the personal journey that had brought them here and the path forward that awaited their decision. The morning after the gala, Olivia woke to her phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. Media coverage had begun, and her team was frantically sharing links and screenshots. She scrolled through headlines with growing amazement. Reed Foundation revolutionizes philanthropy with immersive gala experience. Billionaires confronted with reality at unconventional charity event. From performative to purposeful, how Alexander Reed is changing philanthropy. Most coverage was positive, praising the innovative approach and authentic engagement. Some traditional business publications were more critical, questioning whether confrontational philanthropy would ultimately reduce donations. Social media was ablaze with contrasting reactions. Some wealthy attendees complaining about guilt tripping, others posting thoughtful reflections on how the experience had changed their perspective. A text from Alexander appeared. "Have you seen the Wall Street Journal yet? Front page of the business section. Apparently, we've started a philanthropy revolution. Coffee in 30? They met at a small cafe midway between their apartments, away from the corporate world where they might be recognized. Alexander arrived first, securing a corner table that offered some privacy. When Olivia entered, his face lit up in a way that made her heart skip despite her attempts at emotional restraint. "Congratulations, revolutionary," he said as she sat down, sliding a newspaper toward her. The article featured a photo of them standing together in the reflection garden, deep in conversation, Manhattan glittering behind them. "They're calling it the most significant disruption to elite philanthropy in decades," Olivia noted, skimming the article. "That's unexpected." "The board is divided," Alexander admitted. "Half are thrilled with the publicity and increased donations. The other half are concerned we've alienated traditional supporters. And which half will prevail? The results speak for themselves. Donations up 30%, massive social media engagement, corporate partners already asking how they can participate next year." He smiled. "Numbers have a persuasive quality all their own." "So professionally we won," Olivia said, meeting his eyes. "What happens now?" Alexander understood she wasn't asking about the foundation. "That depends on you. The cabin offer stands. I've cleared my schedule for the next 3 days." Olivia had spent half the night considering this decision, weighing risks against possibilities. "I need to ask you something first, and I want complete honesty. Always. Is this, whatever is happening between us, worth the complications it will create for both of us?" Alexander didn't answer immediately, giving the question the consideration it deserved. "I've built a life focused on achievement, expansion, acquisition," he finally said. "It's been successful by conventional metrics, but increasingly hollow. Since meeting you, I've rediscovered purpose, reconnected with values I'd set aside. That's not something I'm willing to lose, regardless of complications." His candor touched her. "I've spent years defining myself in opposition to wealth and power. she admitted. Being attracted to you challenges my self-concept in uncomfortable ways. And yet, I've never met anyone who listens like you do, who's willing to question their assumptions, who sees me completely. She took a breath. So yes, I'll come to the cabin, to explore whatever this is becoming. The relief and joy in his expression made the risk feel worthwhile. 3 hours later, they were driving north in Alexander's rarely used Audi, leaving the city behind. He had insisted on driving himself rather than using his usual car service, creating a bubble of privacy as they traveled into the Catskills. The conversation flowed easily between them, ranging from childhood memories to favorite books, to philosophical debates about responsibility and privilege. The cabin, when they arrived, defied Olivia's expectations once again. Rather than the luxury retreat she had imagined, it was a genuine cabin, rustic and modestly sized, built from local timber with a wraparound porch overlooking a small private lake. Inside was comfortable but simple. A stone fireplace, well-worn furniture, shelves lined with books and board games rather than expensive art. "This has been in my family for generations," Alexander explained, setting down their bags. "One of the few things my father didn't take when he left. My grandfather built it himself in the 1950s. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, genuinely impressed by its authenticity. "And completely unexpected. I come here when I need to remember who I am beneath the CEO identity. No staff, no assistant, no connectivity except emergency satellite." He gestured to the kitchen. "Hope you meant it when you said you could cook, because we're on our own here." "You're serious? Billionaire Alexander Reed chops his own firewood and washes his own dishes? Only here." His smile held a hint of vulnerability. "It keeps me grounded." The next 3 days unfolded in a rhythm entirely removed from their usual lives. They hiked forest trails, cooked simple meals together, read books on the porch as afternoon rain pattered on the roof. Evenings were spent by the fireplace, sharing stories and perspectives, their conversations deepening with each passing day. Physical attraction remained a powerful undercurrent, expressing itself in increasingly intimate moments, hands lingering during everyday tasks, bodies drawing closer on the couch, kisses growing more passionate. Yet both maintained a certain restraint, understanding that their connection needed to be built on something more substantial than physical desire. On their final evening, they sat on the dock watching the sunset paint the lake in crimson and gold. Olivia's head rested on Alexander's shoulder, his arm around her waist, the comfortable silence of people who no longer needed to fill every moment with words. "I don't want to go back tomorrow," she admitted softly. "We could stay longer." "You know we can't. You have board meetings. I have clients. Reality awaits." Alexander turned to face her fully. "That's the real question, isn't it? Whether what we've found here can survive in the real world, with all its complications and contradictions." "I've been thinking about that," Olivia said. "About how we navigate the power imbalance, the public scrutiny, the fundamental differences in our circumstances. And I think we've been looking at it wrong, focusing on externals rather than essentials." Alexander raised an eyebrow, encouraging her to continue. "The essentials are these. Do we respect each other? Do we challenge each other to grow? Do we share core values, even if we express them differently? Does being together make both of us better versions of ourselves?" "Yes to all," Alexander said without hesitation. "Emphatically, yes. Then the rest is just logistics. Complicated logistics, certainly, but solvable." Alexander's smile broadened. "Spoken like someone who manages complex projects for a living." "Exactly. We approach it as a challenge to solve rather than an insurmountable obstacle." He took her hands in his. "I've never met anyone like you, Olivia Bennett. You see problems as opportunities, contradictions as invitations to deeper understanding. And you, Alexander Reed, are not at all the man I assumed you were when we first met. You're far more complex, more thoughtful, more willing to question yourself. "So we were both wrong," he said, drawing her closer. "And both right in ways we couldn't have anticipated." Their kiss was different from previous ones, not tentative exploration or passionate impulse, but something deeper. A commitment to the journey they were beginning, with all its unknown twists and challenges. When they returned to the city the following afternoon, reality reasserted itself immediately. Alexander's phone exploded with messages as they regained signal. Board concerns about negative coverage from conservative donors, Marcus needing decisions on a pending acquisition, his executive assistant with dozens of scheduling requests. Olivia received her own barrage, Emma demanding details about the weekend, her team with questions about post-gala strategy, a major non-profit interested in hiring Carson Group based on the gala's success. They sat in the car outside Olivia's apartment building, both staring at their phones with rueful expressions. "Reality calling," Alexander said dryly. "Loudly," Olivia agreed. "Dinner tomorrow? My place?" "I'd like that." Before she could exit the car, Alexander reached for her hand. "One thing before we dive back into our separate worlds. I want you to know that what happened at the cabin wasn't an interlude or an escape. It was a beginning." Olivia squeezed his hand. "I know. For me too." In the weeks that followed, they navigated the complexities of integrating their personal relationship with their professional lives. They were discreet but not secretive, allowing news of their relationship to emerge gradually rather than making formal announcements. There were challenges, as expected. Some colleagues viewed Olivia's promotion to lead a new social impact division at Carson Group as favoritism rather than recognition of her talents. Conservative board members questioned Alexander's business judgment, attributing his increased focus on ethical practices to Olivia's influence rather than genuine conviction. But there were triumphs as well. The Reed Foundation's new approach became a model studied by philanthropic organizations worldwide. Olivia's innovative marketing strategies for social causes attracted clients passionate about authentic engagement. Together, they found ways to leverage their complementary strengths and perspectives. 6 months after the gala, they sat in the rooftop garden at Montrose Gardens where they had shared their first real dinner. The space had special significance now, a reminder of how far they had come from initial prejudgments to deep understanding. "I have something for you," Alexander said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew not a jewelry box as Olivia momentarily feared, but a small compass, newer than the antique he had given her but similar in design. "Another compass?" she asked, taking it curiously. "Open it." Inside, engraved on the back of the case, were the coordinates of the cabin and the date of their weekend there. Below were the words, "Where north became clear." Emotion caught in Olivia's throat. It was perfect. Not a showy gesture or expensive token, but a meaningful acknowledgement of their journey. "I have the original in my office," she said. "It reminds me daily to stay oriented toward what matters, not what's expected." "That's what you've given me," Alexander said, taking her hand across the table. "A recalibration of what truly matters." As the sun set over Manhattan, Olivia reflected on the unlikely path that had brought them together. She had once defined herself in opposition to everything Alexander represented, viewing wealth and power through a single critical lens. He had operated in a world where his perspective was rarely challenged, surrounded by people seeking advantage rather than authentic connection. Now they had each expanded their worldview, not by abandoning their principles, but by recognizing the nuance and complexity beyond initial assumptions. Their differences remained. She still challenged structural inequalities. He still operated within capitalist systems. But those differences had become strengths rather than barriers, offering complementary perspectives that made both of them more effective in their respective spheres. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About assumptions. How quickly we make them, how reluctantly we release them, and how much we might miss because of them." "Like assuming all billionaires are shallow, exploitative egomaniacs?" he teased gently. Or assuming all idealists are impractical, judgmental, and no fun at parties? She countered with a smile. Alexander laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Thank goodness we were both wrong. Not entirely wrong, Olivia corrected. Just incomplete. We each had pieces of truth, but not the whole picture. And now? Now we're drawing a more complete map together. She looked at the compass in her hand, then up at the man who had challenged her assumptions as thoroughly as she had challenged his, with better navigation tools than we had before. As they left the garden hand in hand, Olivia felt a sense of alignment she had never experienced between personal and professional, principle and practice, heart and mind. The journey ahead would never be simple, given their different starting points and the complex world they inhabited, but they had found something worth the effort, a connection that made both of them more complete, more effective, more authentically themselves, not despite their differences, but because of them. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen